This is the Graham-Bartram proposal for an Antarctic flag, and it's the only Antarctic flag that I had ever seen before. And so I was thinking about the experience with the Pride flag compared to this flag, and I thought if I were someone who saw a photo of people flying this flag, would I feel the same connection that other LGBTQ people felt when they saw the Pride flag? And the honest answer is no, I would absolutely not. And that's because I don't feel like this is my flag. And most people don't feel like this is their flag. And in fact, I have never seen this flag flying in the real world in Antarctica or off Antarctica anywhere. So I started thinking, what's the difference? Why is the Pride flag so powerful? And why is this flag not powerful? What is the difference there? And how can we make a flag for Antarctica that is as powerful as the Pride flag? So I started doing some digging, some research, and I started looking at historic flags of Antarctica. And Antarctic history is full of flags, which is awesome. These top two are expedition flags. So, in the early days, especially before they had permanent stations, they would send expeditions to the continent for a few months at a time. They would usually travel around, and some of them brought a flag with them. This was usually because this helped with sponsorship. It helped pay for the expeditions because they could fly this at the fundraising dinners. Then down here in the bottom left, you have sledge flags. So sledges were these vehicles that people would use to carry their supplies across the snow and ice, and they would pull it behind them. And each person in the early days had their own individual sledge flag that they would use just so they could recognize their own sledge and so they could see each other when there was a lot of wind. And then over on the bottom right here, you have marker flags. These are flags that people still use, and they just show things in the landscape. So these flags I got from a trail. They were marking trails. You have black ones, they mark danger. You have blue ones, they mark fuel lines. And so when I was thinking about these flags, it was pretty obvious to me why people don't fly these flags, right? These aren't flags of Antarctica, and they aren't flags of Antarcticans either. They aren't flags of the people who care about Antarctica. They are neither flags of place nor flags of people. They are instead flags of very specific things that are intended to be flown in very specific circumstances. So they don't have that broad appeal or that broad meaning. So here are some other examples of flags of neither place nor people. So these are flags that don't represent an identity or a group or a geographical region. So you have utility flags like the marker flags in the last slide. You also have company flags like this flag of Nestle, event flags like this one from the climate conference in Glasgow. And then you have art flags like this one on the right here by Dan Archer. And again, these are all flags that are meant to be flown in very specific circumstances for very specific reasons. So these aren't flags that represent a big area, and they're not flags that people are going to be flying really outside of very specific circumstances, like the events, like this art flag. So those are neither flags of place nor flags of people. But then what about the pride flag? What is that? Well, it's not a flag of place because, again, people who are LGBTQ fly this flag all around the world. So this is a flag of people, but not a flag of place. And there are many other examples of this. Again, flags that aren't tied to a geographic area, but represent a part of people's identity. So you have flags of gender and sexual minority groups like this bisexual pride flag or the rainbow pride flag, political groups and social movements like this Black Lives Matter flag, religious groups and cultural groups like this Pan-African flag. So a flag of people, in my understanding and definition, is any flag that a person can look at and say, this represents a part of who I am. I see myself in this flag. And these are often very powerful flags for that reason, because people want to fly them. They want to display that part of their identity, right? So we have the pride flag, which is a powerful flag that's flying in Antarctica. But this pride flag doesn't represent Antarctica. And we do have a flag that represents Antarctica, but it doesn't represent the people of Antarctica. And so that flag is a flag of place and not a flag of people. So these are flags that represent a geographical area, any geographical area, such as cities, counties, countries, or in the case of Antarctica, a continent. And I chose the flags here because these are some of the most famous cities in the world, right? Los Angeles, Rio de Janeiro, Paris, Boston. These are really big cities that most people know, but these are not really popular flags that most people fly. In fact, most of these flags I have never seen before until I made this slide. Um, and that's because they represent a geographical area, but they don't represent the people of that geographical area. I live in Boston, and so this flag on the top right here is actually my flag, I guess, but I've never seen it before. I've never flown it before. Who flies this flag then? Well, it's the institutions of this place. This is a flag that the city council flies, not the flag that the people of Boston fly. And this is always really interesting to see because there are a couple of things that happen when you have a symbol like this that represents a place but doesn't represent people. And the first thing that can happen is that people feel a place based identity, but they represent that with other symbols. Okay, so here are symbols of Boston. And these are the symbols that people in Boston use because they feel like I am a Bostonian and that's important to me. But they don't fly the flag. Instead, they use the Boston Red Sox logo, which is our baseball team. I see this almost every day, even when the baseball team is not playing. Sometimes people will use structures or buildings as icons instead. So this middle photo is a sit-go sign, and I see this as a tattoo on people. I see it as hats, as t-shirts, but I never see a tattoo or a hat or a t-shirt of the Boston flag. And the other thing that can happen is that people can still represent, they can use a place-based flag, but it's a place-based flag of a larger place. So this is the flag of New England, which is a group of 5 states here in the US. And people fly this flag instead of the Boston flag. Boston is in New England, and people feel more importantly about being Bostonian than they do about being a New Englander, but they still fly this flag. And in a similar way, you might find, with the Paris flag here. People in Paris may feel more Parisian than they feel French, but they would still fly the French flag because it's a better symbol. So I'm going to put this to the test now. And just tell me honestly, do you know this flag? Okay, it seems like absolutely no one knows it so far. That's not surprising either. Yeah, this is not a great flag. But there's a reason you should know it. And I won't tell you what it is. Instead, I'll ask you to go back to that website and answer, do you recognize this? Okay, just about everyone says yes. And then one more. How about this one? Yeah, of course. Yeah. So that flag is the flag of New York City, which is one of the biggest and perhaps the most popular city in the world, right? This is a city with a huge global impact. People think about it all the time. Everyone knows New York City, but no one knows New York City's flag. And that's because it's not a flag of the people of New York. And if you ask somebody from New York, do you feel like a New Yorker? They would say, absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. But they don't use that flag to show that they are a New Yorker. Instead, they use other symbols like the Yankees logo, the baseball team logo. But yeah, that's great, FA. Yes, the I Heart New York. That's right. That's a great logo. Way more popular than the flag, right? And for good reason. That's simpler, it's more iconic, and people are much more willing to display that to show their connection to New York. So that's the first thing that can happen when you have a symbol that doesn't show that doesn't represent the people of a place. So the other thing that happens when you have a flag of a place that doesn't represent the people of that place is that people don't feel place-based identity, and instead they symbolize other identities, and they use other symbols. And this is a pattern that's really repeated quite often, especially in post-colonial places. Um, Places where you have different ethnic groups with very distinct cultures. And this can be a pretty serious issue. Right here, you see the flag of South Africa from 1928 to 1994, which, in my opinion, is one of the worst flags ever made. It has three other flags on it. So, this is a flag that doesn't actually represent the people of South Africa. It's got flags of colonizers and colonies on this flag. What happened in South Africa? Well, when they had this flag, people weren't flying it to show that they were South African and that they shared an identity with other people in the place of South Africa. Instead, they might fly it to show those other flags that are on it. Again, the flag of the United Kingdom or the flag of these two Dutch colonies. Or they might just fly the flag of the Netherlands or the flag of the British colonies that came before a united South Africa. And what you're showing when you display a symbol like this, instead of a symbol of a place and a people, is you are saying my identity as someone of British heritage, my identity as a white European descendant is more important to me than my identity as a South African. So I am showing my connection to people in a faraway place because I feel more connected to them than I do the very people who are in this country. And of course, South Africa has a very complicated and fraught history that's full of racism and full of oppression. And there are many reasons for that. And flags are only one small part of it, but they are an important part. So, what happened is you got this other flag of people. The flag in the middle here is the flag of the African National Congress. And this is a political flag. It's the flag that a lot of Black, especially South Africans, flew to represent a desire for change. It's the flag of the political party of Nelson Mandela. And you probably already know that in 1994, that political party came to power and apartheid ended in South Africa. This is something that I see a lot in Antarctica. Of the two things that can happen when you have a flag that doesn't represent people of a place, what happens in Antarctica is the second thing. People symbolize other identities instead of that place-based identity. So these are photos from stations around Antarctica. And as you can see in the Ukrainian station, they fly the Ukrainian flag and no Antarctic flag. They fly the American flag at the American station, no Antarctic flag. They fly the British flag at the British station, no Antarctic flag. It's understandable that people would feel connected to their nationality. You know, they are still a part of that country. They are still citizens of that country. But even here, when they're working in Antarctica on the same questions, on the same problems, in the same place, they still have no symbol to represent the connection that they have to one another. And in essence, what ends up happening is they don't feel that connection, partly because of the lack of symbols. So this is a photo from the South Pole, and this is actually a symbol of unity, or it's intended to be. So in 1954, all of the countries who flags are here they signed a treaty that now governs Antarctica. So they fly these flags to show that this is an international agreement between a bunch of countries. But it's interesting to me because when I see all of these distinct symbols, what I see is distinct nationalities, distinct languages, different ethnicities, different cultures. There's not a single symbol of what we share together across all of these countries. And this is a real problem because Antarctica has countries who want a part of it. Different countries have different expectations, different plans for what happens to Antarctica. In 2048, this agreement that all of these countries signed will actually end. So there's a real need for us to feel like we have a shared interest and a shared community, for us to be working together on this one big problem. But we don't really have an opportunity to do that because we're so divided in how we approach it. So what did South Africa do? The flag of South Africa was adopted in 1994. So again, that's when apartheid ended, and that's when Nelson Mandela came to power. Nelson Mandela used this flag on the left here, this black, green, and yellow flag. But he didn't make that flag the flag of the country. Instead, he used those colors in the flag of South Africa, and it has the colors of the United Kingdom flag and the flag of the Netherlands. So these are three very different flags that represent three very different ideologies, different experiences, different cultures, but they were brought together under a single flag. And this flag no longer just represented a place, it represented the people in this place. Something pretty amazing happened after this. So this photo is from 1 year after the flag was adopted and apartheid ended. This is the Rugby World Cup in South Africa. You can see here the people in the crowd are mostly white. The rugby team was also mostly white, Afrikaners, people who in the largest part did not support the end of apartheid. But you see in the monitor back there, Nelson Mandela, who is the newly appointed leader, stands there with one of the white rugby players, and the crowd is all flying this new flag. You know, this flag didn't end racism in South Africa. It's still there. But now people had a symbol. And when they flew that, they were saying, my connection to other people in South Africa is more important than our differences of race, than our differences of culture. And so again, this is a flag of place and a flag of people, which is really, I think, what the best flags usually are. All the flags that we see flying often are really flags of both place and people. And I included a few examples here of Canadian flags, the Canadian flag, the Japanese flag, the Chicago flag, the flag of Amsterdam. And these aren't flags of one specific experience either, right? Like people in South Africa still had those different political beliefs and ideologies, but they were still flying this flag. And the flag of Canada, that represents people with a lot of different experiences, but it represents one common shared tie to a geographic place. And the other thing that's really cool that happens, I'll compare Chicago to Boston. So in Boston, we use our sports logo to represent our city. But in Chicago, sometimes the opposite happens. Sometimes people will go to a sports game and fly their city flag instead of using the logo of the sports team. And that's because this is a really beautiful flag. This is a really good symbol and it works. So to review, you have flags of neither place nor people, like this company flag. You have flags of place but not of people, like Boston. Then you have flags of people that are not flags of place, like this Progress Pride flag that was designed by Daniel Quasar. And then you have flags of place, like the South African flag, that are also flags of people. And so as I was thinking about this with Antarctica, it was very clear to me that the best flags are always these two categories, right? They're always flags that represent people, of course, because people fly what represents people. So Antarctica, we had a flag that's not of place and not of people. We had a flag that's of a place but not of people. We flew flags that were of people in Antarctica, but they didn't represent Antarctica. So what's left? It's this flag for Antarctica. And that's the flag that I wanted to make. I wanted a flag that would represent both place and people. So this is where it all started. In McMurdo Station, we have this craft room. Uh, as you can imagine, there's not a lot to do, especially in the winter. So this room is where I made the first version of the Antarctic flag that I'm about to show you. And here's what it's composed of. It has two vertical stripes. It represents the long nights and the long days in Antarctica. Again, if you're at the South Pole, your night is 6 months long and your day is 6 months long. There's only one sunrise and one sunset each year. So very, very long nights and days. Then you have this white peak, which represents mountains and icebergs and pressure ridges, because no matter where you are in Antarctica, you see these peaks along the horizon in some form of ice or snow. And then you have the south compass arrow, of course, south being the direction that Antarctica is on most maps. And also it represents the history of exploration, especially the early explorers in Antarctica. And then those two shapes combined create this diamond shape, which represents a hope for Antarctica's future. And so this is the flag in its final form. This is the design I came up with. And I called it True South. In a lot of languages, True North means like your guiding principle, the thing that you can look to when you're making difficult decisions. So I named it True South because I wanted it to represent those shared values that we as an Antarctic community can look to when we're making difficult decisions, even if we disagree politically. I had this flag. I made it in 2018, and I didn't really do anything with it until last year during quarantine. And that's the first time I revealed this design to the public. And keep in mind that what inspired this entire thing is the pride flag and my experience with the pride flag. I wanted to create a flag that made people feel the same depth of connection that they felt when viewing that flag, right? So I was hoping to make a flag of place and a flag of people, but hoping to do that and actually doing that are different things. So really the test of whether or not this is a flag of place and a flag of people is, are people flying it? Are people feeling that same connection? An amazing thing happened when I revealed this design. These news outlets started picking it up. It started going into CNN. It started going into Condé Nast Traveler and MSN and a bunch of design magazines. But of course, I don't want necessarily the press to be excited about it. I want the people of Antarctica to be excited about it. I'm happy to say they were. And the same thing happened once again. People saw this flag, they saw these photos, and they messaged me and they said, you know, this is really cool. It's really amazing to be able to see this represented. And I feel like I see myself in this flag and I want to fly it. And that's just such a cool thing to experience. And in these photos, I think it really captures it because here are photos from the Ecuadorian station, the Chilean station, the American stations, the British stations, the top middle one, that's from the French station. So each of these are photos of people from different cultural backgrounds, from different language groups, but they're all displaying the one thing they have in common, which is that they care about Antarctica. And all of these photos are actually from Antarctica, but here's something that I think is even cooler than that, right? So this flag helps people who already care about Antarctica feel closer to one another. But these are all photos of people flying this flag around the world. And most of these people have never seen Antarctica, have never been to Antarctica. But they feel that connection because they can display this symbol now. And so they can start to care a little bit more about Antarctica. So here we have the flags from the Philippines, from Norway, Australia, the United States, from Djibouti. So it's really all over the world. And it was with that and with the continued enthusiasm that people show for this flag that I knew finally we had a flag of place and a flag of people for Antarctica. So that's sort of the story in a nutshell. It's still ongoing. We're still doing a lot of work, and a lot of people don't know about it yet. And we're looking to get more official adoption of the flag. But I'm really proud of how far we've gone so far. And again, this is not something that I can take credit for. It's really the community of people who are choosing to fly this flag that's made it as powerful as it is. So that was a lot of me talking. I'm sorry. Thank you for listening for as long as you have.